No person in this world, rich or poor, is exempt from the realities of life. Life, after all, is the great equalizer. What can be different, though, is the level at which a person is exposed to the varying extremes of life's realities. Certain professions like policing, security, emergency services, medical, military, and so on can be the catalyst that super exposes these individuals to those realities. Law enforcement officers are called to view the worst of humanity on a daily, scratch that, hourly basis. EMTs shifts are filled with hosing out the back of a unit. Vehicle roofs are torn off with the jaws of life, only for a firefighter to realize they were too late. These are just a few examples of related professions that share one awful connection. That connection is a daily front row ticket to life's traumas for others and possibly for theirs. I want to discuss my experiences to shed a little deeper insight into this phenomenon and hopefully inspire others to inventory their experiences and determine if they need to be looked into further. One story of mine depicts the internal demons that can lay dormant in our subconscious. I was 27 when I started investigating the most disturbing crimes, and these included robberies, assaults, abuses, and murders. And my police department took all these possible offenses very seriously. And it's because of the serious nature we approach these things that my team and I would be called to the scene of all infant deaths. Some of these young deaths resulted from abuse and carelessness or neglect, but most were natural. Sudden infant death syndrome, or SIDS, is one of the most common reasons these young souls I met passed away. I was young with no family, and I was pretty much only having to worry about or fear for myself. These scenes affected me because there is no way to avoid despair when seeing lost innocence and the destruction that the events levied on the young parents. On the other hand, as a young man, I could move on relatively quickly. At the time, I never really felt the need to talk about these experiences or clean my mind. I didn't know that I wasn't getting over it quickly. Turns out, I was storing these experiences. Let's skip ahead 8 years, and I was at Piedmont Hospital in downtown Atlanta with my wife, and I was holding my firstborn boy, Colton. It was an absolutely euphoric experience. Colton would grab my finger and squeeze it tightly, letting me know that he was reaching out for stability. Well, that is what I promised him at that moment. I would whisper that same promise to his little brother 2 years later. My wife and I took Colton home after 3 days in the hospital. No manual, no troubleshooting sheet, just a baby and good luck. And my wife and I started the journey of figuring it out. That day, I had no idea I wouldn't sleep well for months. Of course, anyone with kids will tell you that you're not going to sleep well with a newborn, but this was different. Whenever my son went to sleep, I would leave his room and I would lay my head down and try to get some sleep. But images fussed my mind. Images that I had developed years ago. Ones I had not thought about since the day that they were developed. Flooded back in with disturbing clarity. The images that filled my brain were of the poor infants that met a far too young fate, and the destruction of the parents who at the time were just doing their best to figure it out. That level and flavor of anxiety is one I had never encountered before. True, I've been shot at. I've jumped out of planes, had intense physical fights, and served high-risk search warrants and led car chases. But this new anxiety, it leveled me. There have been other examples of other experiences lying dormant and raising their heads later in my life, and this one was especially difficult for me. And this is why I recommend that anyone in these professions look into habits and behaviors that counter the effects of these types of things that can have a real significant impact on our psyche, even if they don't present as dire at the moment. Talk about it. Talk about it. Talk about it. And for leaders at organizations, guiding these types of professionals also need to be leading the charge towards mental health. high-ranking ambassadors will go a long way to break the stigma held in public service, medical, military, and private security industries around coming forward with mental health issues. It's a real fear in law enforcement circles, for example, that if you come forward with experiencing complex mental health issues, you'll have your badge, gun, and job taken away. It's not an out there thought. One of the first things you do when you apply to be a police officer is take a psychological exam. And that exam can determine if you get the job or not. This is similar in private security field as well. This unwillingness or fear to come forward often leads to the compounding of negative mental health behaviors that only worsens the person's health. We not only see it, but often the worst culprit is the constant expectation of tragedy. Almost everyone I know in law enforcement and security constantly, subconsciously prepares for disaster. Go to dinner with a friend who belongs to any of these professions, and you will quickly see what I'm talking about. If you're driving to a restaurant, the car will be backed into a spot at the restaurant. Why back in? Well, all the cops that are listening to this right now are yelling at it for a quick exit. Duh! They'll enter the establishment, their heads will move back and forth on a swivel. They're checking all the exits and checking out all the customers. The host will then show you to your table where your friend will strangely insist on some random seat. You'll likely not thinking much of it, but that it may just have been a tad strange. But on the other hand, your friend has not sat with his back to the front door of a restaurant in years, all because he knows if an active shooter was to enter, he could get the drop on him. That's only in the first 2 minutes of going to a restaurant with your friend. These thoughts and actions could ultimately save their life. But what does the constant foreshadowing of tragedy and misery do to the individual's mind over time? We're protectors, and each of us has that distinct ability to undergo stressors that others either cannot deal with on a regular basis or choose not to. I'm saying that yes, we can handle those stressors, but remember we hold those at 1,000 times the amount of everyone around us. We need to understand that while being tough is our superpower, we are in fact not superheroes. We don't need to just look into it. We need to do it. Take stock of your mental health. It's important to me because this year I have encountered too many friends who would have gone to a restaurant, backed their car in, surveyed the land once they entered, and sat facing the door, preparing for every single threat, only to meet the person they didn't prepare to protect against as they tragically took their own lives.